My name is Greg Abbott, and I am the moderator for today's debate. And unfortunately, it looks like the debate is beginning at about the same time that you are moving from your main course to your dessert. And I have been in your situation before, and I have always ignored what was going on up here and ate my dessert. And I want to encourage you to do the same. You see, I've grown accustomed to that. I'm on the Supreme Court where I deal with 8 other justices, and I'm very accustomed to talking when no one is listening to me. In fact, I heard a joke that is just, frankly, too silly to tell, but I'm going to break the rules and tell it to you anyway because it reminds me exactly of what it's like being on the Texas Supreme Court and dealing with some of the people I have to deal with. There was this duck who walked into a store and walked up to the salesman and asked the salesman for some curtains. The salesman said, "We don't have any curtains." So the duck left. Very next day, the duck goes back into the same store, goes back up to the same salesman and asks the salesman if they have any curtains. And the salesman said, "Look, you were here yesterday. I told you yesterday we don't have any curtains." So the duck left. Duck comes back a third day, goes back up to the same salesman, asks the salesman, "Do you have any curtains?" The salesman said, "Look, duck, I've told you twice already, we don't have any curtains. If you come back again, I'm going to get out a hammer, and I'm going to nail your duck bill up to the wall, and that's going to be all of you, duck." So the duck leaves. Duck comes back the very next day, goes up to the same salesman, approaches him, and asks him, "Do you have any nails?" Salesman said no. Duck said, "Well, got any curtains?" Well, it's my privilege to moderate this tremendous debate today. Let me very quickly go over the format. Each side will present an 8-minute opening statement. And by the way, the format is a format that the parties agreed to beforehand. We've hammered out the details of it. All sides agree, and all sides will abide by the restrictions that are being applied. They will each start out with an 8-minute opening statement. Our goal, if we can do it time-wise, is to present 6 questions to each candidate. However, the program is going to conclude at 1:30. If we are unable to present 6 questions to each candidate, we will cut off the questioning and then move to the closing statements, for which each side has been allotted 2 minutes. Let me just say up front, I think all the appropriate people know, but rebroadcast or reproduction of any video or audio portion of this debate for commercial purposes is strictly prohibited. Video and audio are to be used by the news media only and for news purposes only. Now, as Norman Adams indicated earlier, we have a very distinguished panel with us today who will be asking the questions. Let me just say at the outset that in addition to being asked to serve as moderator, I was also requested to submit some questions to the panel to be asked of the people participating in the debate, and unfortunately I was late and did not have an opportunity to get my questions to the panel members. So if the participants wouldn't mind, I'd like to go ahead and just mention my questions to you now, and if you have time, you can address those in a second. My first question is, if a lawyer is making an argument in the woods and no one is there to hear him, is he lying? The second one, and I apologize to Ed Blum for this because it does favor Mayor Lanier with his transportation background, but why are there interstate highways in Hawaii? Another troubling issue facing Houston is that if corn oil is made from corn, and olive oil is made from olives, and coconut oil is made from coconuts, what is baby oil made from? Two last questions, and that is that you all know that little black box that's used on planes that is indestructible. Why can't they make the whole plane out of the same thing? Then one last one I hope you have time to address, and that is, if a cow laughed, would milk come out of its nose? Seriously though, and before we begin, let me reflect very briefly on the solemn significance of this debate. And when I mention the significance, I'm not talking about the significance of the subject matter of this debate, but instead the significance of the fact that we are having this debate. Free and open debate is the hallmark of the great democracy in which we live. Democracy succeeds only when we have an informed electorate. Unlike other societies that don't encourage or tolerate an open discussion and frank debate on issues that affect communities, we here in Houston, Texas, United States of America, can engage in verbal combat for an hour today without fear of reprisal or physical harm. We truly enjoy a unique system that should be cherished. The winner of today's debate will not be Mayor Lanier or Ed Blum. It will be you, the citizens of Houston. You will be more informed and better able to cast your vote in November on this very important issue. With that, I would like to commence the debate. As I referenced earlier, the debate will begin by each side making an 8-minute opening statement, and then we will begin the questioning by the panel members. And before I turn the podium over to Mayor Lanier, who will first offer his opening statement, let me remind the parties one more time, and that is that time limits will be strictly enforced, and there will be a horn here louder than any of us want to hear to let us know when time has expired. At this time, let me turn it over to Mayor Bob Lanier.
Thank you. And first, I'd like to answer those 5 important questions. My answers are yes on 1, 2 beats me, 3 surely not from babies, 4 the plane wouldn't fly, and 5 no. With that, I'd like to echo something that Norm said earlier. It was here at the Heights, really, that my political career, such as it's been, started. I've enjoyed the support of this chamber over these 6 years, and it's here appropriately enough that it's about to end. I come here today to ask you to vote no to the proposed charter amendment to end affirmative action in Houston city government for women and minorities. Ask you to vote no. It's true I'll be leaving office and have no political gain, but I have a passionate interest in this issue as a private citizen. It relates to the value I hold most dear in our democracy, and that is a constant effort I think we all need to make to ensure full participation and full opportunity for all our people in this country, in this city's resources and activity. First, a word about the ballot language. Nothing tricky about it. Mr. Blum, up here on his ballot, his caption was, "A City of Houston Charter Amendment to End Preferential Treatment Affirmative Action." So, what we said was, this is a charter amendment to end preferential treatment affirmative action. We pretty much copied what he wrote down. The charge has been made, well, the city doesn't generally do that. It has to copy what the petitioner writes. Number one, that's not right. The state statute says that the authority ordering the election shall prescribe the wording of a proposition as it is to appear on the ballot. I had the city attorney check, and 5 out of the last 6 charter amendments were summarized by the city and appeared in that manner. For example, a recent minimum wage amendment norm, the petitioner said it was to give a living wage. Well, you might not have been pleased if we'd have summarized it just that way. No, he would not have been. And so we went ahead and said it was a matter of increasing the minimum wage from X to Y, and a violation be a misdemeanor, which we thought more fairly described it. In this case, because we probably expected likely litigation, we chose really to track the language that the petitioner used. Now, since then, polls have showed, well, maybe people don't want to end affirmative action. Maybe they'd like to amend it or change it or make it better. And as that 70-point lead started moving down, there's been a movement away from ending it, and the idea is the petitioner would like to take that language off and like to make the language read something other than ending affirmative action. And this bottom part of his petition would have no reference to ending affirmative action. His later literature has no reference to ending affirmative action. But that's what this debate really is about, and that's what we're trying to say on the ballot, to be frank with people. Why do we have affirmative action? Before this program started, 95% of Houston's contract business was handled by male Anglo contractors, 95%. And studies show that if this amendment passes, the numbers move back toward that 95% with 5% for women and minorities. What is our program? We did a year-long study of capacity. We determined there was about at least 20% capacity out there in the aggregate among women and minorities. We next determined there was an underutilization of that capacity, some due to remnants of discrimination, some because contractors simply didn't know. We decided a goals program would work, and we set up a voluntary goals program. They have to exercise good faith to go look in the marketplace of women contractors and minority contractors to see if they can find some work there at market rates. The only penalty for lack of good faith is a suspension from bidding, and there we give the contractor impartial arbitration if he disagrees with our finding. It's been said this is a quota, not a goal. That's simply not true. It is simply not true. I've never in my life urged that. This is not that. We have had roughly 400 contractors who did not meet their goals. None were sanctioned. 400 that did not meet their goals, none were sanctioned. Does that sound like a quota? We've had over 90 contracts where no goals were specified because we looked at the work and it was specialized work and we didn't think that capacity was out there. We've had another 90 where, based on the experience of the contractor, we later lowered the goals to what appeared to be the marketplace. And why do we think these goals would work? We thought they would work because guys like me, using my own experience, I'd moved in a given circle when I was in business, and I simply didn't know the young women contractors. I simply didn't know the young minority contractors. And so, not being exposed to them, they didn't get a lot of business from me. What we're saying today is, hey, go and look. It's a new world out there. And when you look, you're going to find there's a lot of capacity out there to do this work on a wonderful basis. And it's working. Out of $1 billion of work, 200 million went to women and minorities. The couple of words about this opposition. Number one is it's a California sponsored deal. This is California language, supported in part by the money from California. And let me tell you this, we may need lessons from lots of places, but in Houston, Texas, we don't need race relations lessons from Los Angeles or from California. The second thing I would say is the Wall Street Journal has written that California's affirmative action bashing, immigrant bashing, has cost them business in favor of Texas. That's true. We don't need to join that crowd. The next thing I'd point out is Governor Bush stopped the efforts to stop the affirmative action, to stop the repeal of the affirmative action program in the state of Texas, and the state of Texas still has one under Governor Bush's lead. The next thing I'd point out is that the Greater Houston Partnership has endorsed our opposition to the repeal of this, feels it would be bad for business. The Houston Chronicle also says it would be a mistake to repeal our affirmative action program and jump into the unknown. I urge you to vote no, because I think this, if passed, would send a terrible message to women and to minorities that we don't care enough about doing business with them to even look to see if there is capacity out there at market rates. Thank you.
And now the opening statement by Ed Blum.
I'd like to thank this chamber. This is the second time I've debated in front of this group before. I'd like to thank our distinguished panelists. I'd like to especially thank and salute Bob Lanier. He has been a good leader to this city. It's an honor to debate a man that I, frankly, have supported vigorously in the past. Ladies and gentlemen, behind every hard-charging man is an astonished woman. Let me introduce the astonished woman in my life, my wife of 17 years, Lark Blum. Would you please welcome her? Mayor Lanier has been a very popular mayor. He's charming and he's folksy. But this debate is going to be one on the power of our ideas and our ideals, not on popularity or wit. The next generation of our city's leaders are faced with ongoing lawsuits and the great possibility that federal legislation that is working its way through Congress right now will compel the city to end its use of race, ethnicity, and gender in our policies. These are vital issues that must be discussed. Race is a difficult issue to talk about. Most people are intimidated and afraid to discuss it. But this we must overcome. We are here today to shed light on a very important issue. We are not here to generate heat. Let me read you the language that will be implemented when HCRI is successful. And it reads as follows. The City of Houston shall not discriminate against or grant preferential treatment to any individual or group on the basis of race, sex, color, ethnicity, or national origin in the operation of public employment and public contracting. We really wouldn't be here discussing this today, debating this issue, if 35 years ago Congress had not failed in drafting the 1964 Civil Rights Act properly. Many of you will remember that in 1964, Senator Hubert Humphrey, who was the floor leader in that great debate, said that the reason he didn't want to include preventing or banning preferences was that it was not necessary. Many objections were raised to the Civil Rights Bill because it didn't include language that specifically outlawed the use of race in preferences. He said, and for those students of civil rights will remember, that he would eat the bill page by page if it ever sanctioned preferences by race. Well, I think it would require an enormous appetite today on the part of Senator Humphrey in light of what has happened to our Civil Rights Acts. Here are our beliefs. Government cannot grant a preference to someone based upon their color or their gender without discriminating against someone because of their color or their gender. The use of race, ethnicity, religion is inherently suspect. Even the proponents of hard quotas admit that a race-neutral society is the ideal. And finally, and the most important, if people are not colorblind, it is all the more important that government must be. The passage of the Houston Civil Rights Initiative this November will accomplish something of critical importance to our city and our nation. It will compel our next generation of city leaders to end race and gender as a criteria in employment and contracting. And it will compel them to expand preferences, expand outreach for all Houstonians who are economically disadvantaged, regardless of their race, regardless of their color, or regardless of their gender. Affirmative action should be colorblind. Let me state it again. Affirmative action should be colorblind. And finally, let me address the issue of fairness as this topic has been framed by the mayor and the defenders of racial preferences. I'll go into some of the nuances between goals and quotas later on. I think now we really go to the heart of the new metaphysics of race and fairness. The question is put, and it's a valid question. If 80% of the business goes to 20% of the population, 80% of the business, meaning dollars, go to 20% of white men, don't white men have a disproportionate share of the business? What is unfair is for government to grant someone a preference because of their color and deny someone a preference because of their color. It's that simple. But just as importantly, the core of this question, the core of this issue is troubling. The premise of this question is that really aren't all white men simply interchangeable? Their skin color and their gender make them all the same. That's the premise, and that premise is wrong. It means that a third-generation River Oaks real estate mogul with a degree from Wharton is just the same as a Spring Branch Elementary School custodian with a degree from Jeff Davis High School. These two white men are not the same. Just because they have the same skin color and gender, people are not interchangeable. To argue this opens the corollary that all blacks are the same, that all Jews are the same, that all women are the same, all Hispanics. They're simply interchangeable. And where have we heard statements like this before? They've come from the Bull Connors and the David Dukes and the Leonard Jeffries. People who believe that skin color is destiny and skin color is identity. Well, let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, skin color is not destiny and gender is not identity. People are individuals and should be judged as such. Racists have long said to minorities, the most important thing about you is your skin color. Let's not inadvertently prove them right. And finally, of all the injustices done by affirmative action and racial preferences, those done to minority children are the worst. They mean to minority children that their skin color automatically means they need special remedial help. I ask you to join with me in ending it. Thank you. I always get the horn.
We now begin with the questioning. The questioning format goes like this. One of the panelists will ask a question of one of the participants. The participant has 1.5 minutes within which to provide an answer. After that time period, then the other participant has 1 minute to respond. After that time period, then we go on to the next panelist, who will then ask a question to the other participant. We first begin with panelist Jesse Gonzalez asking a question to Mayor Lanier.
Mayor Lanier, obviously there will always be minorities. Does this mean the current mandated affirmative action programs should continue indefinitely? If they are not to continue indefinitely, how would these programs be brought to a close?
Good question. My own feeling is I hope we reach the point, and I believe we will reach the point, where affirmative action programs will not be required. My sense, and that's a matter of different opinions, is we'll reach that point when each group has a significant economic stake in our city's economy, where they'll have something to build on, something to offer role models to children on. I would think Our own program has that built into it in that we subtract from the total the amount of work won by DBEs and women as low bidders. So that of the 20%, some 8% now is being won as low bid, and some 12% gets the affirmative action requirement of look over and see if you can't find that quality. So it might be, there'll come a point where they have a certain level of business where I think it will outlive its usefulness. I don't think that's now.
Rebuttal.
Ladies and gentlemen, the city's current program does not have any kind of a mechanism in which it can identify successful minority or women business programs. These programs, as they exist today in the city of Houston, last forever. Everyone whose skin color is black or who has a Hispanic surname or who is a woman qualifies to be recognized as disadvantaged, whether they earn millions, whether they earn thousands, or whether they earn hundreds. There is no graduation system that we have today. And I must tell you, I am not sure we will ever find a way of quantifying when it is that people, based on their ethnicity or their gender, are ever at parity in some field with another. There will always be differences. They will always come naturally, just as they have come naturally throughout our immigration history.
The next question will be asked by Steve Smith to Ed Blum with a rebuttal by Mayor Lanier.
Mr. Blum, blacks, Hispanics, women are saying basically that you're not living in the real world. That in the real world they're discriminated against on a daily basis in almost every aspect of life, and that this is simply a minor effort to make their lives slightly less tilted, to make the playing field slightly less tilted, and underline slightly. Your response to that?
Well, legally, the only challenge that can be made, the only assault that can be made on a affirmative action program legally is if it is proven that there is rampant discrimination in a particular area of endeavor. It is my belief that examining 5 major areas of our lives as Americans proves to me that yes, there is some discrimination, and yes, there always will be discrimination, and yes, we always will have bigots. But if you look at our rates of housing integration, if you look at our rates of crossover voting, if you look at our rates of intermarriage, if you look at how well minorities in this country are achieving academically and achieving through jobs, the discrepancies that existed 30 years ago just don't exist today. I think this is proven social science, and I frankly don't believe from my friends that are minorities and my friends that are women that they suffer the kinds of slings and outrages that many people have got to profess in order to continue these programs through the legal system.
Rebuttal by Mayor Lanier.
What the law says is you look at capacity in women and minorities and you study that. And we did for a year, spent a full year on it, spent right at $1 million. We determined they had at least 20% capacity. Next, you determine if there was underutilization. We discovered there still was underutilization. We made the further determination that not all the discrimination was over, that some of that underutilization was due to discrimination. Some just didn't know them. So we came with a goals program to reach 20%, and all we require of the majority contractor is that he go over there and look among women and minorities, many bright people there, and see if he can't find up to 20% at competitive market prices. You know, 50 years ago when I interviewed at Baker Botch, I was a poor white guy, but if I'd have been poor black, I wouldn't have gotten interviewed. If I'd have been Jewish, I wouldn't have gotten interviewed. 20 years ago, Kay Bailey Hutchison, who told me she supported our program, couldn't get a look by law firms because she was a woman. She had one offer, a job, half price, half price.
The next question will be asked by Linda Benj to Mayor Lanier, for which there is a 1.5-minute response. with a 1-minute rebuttal by Ed Blum.
Mayor Lanier, there appears to be a national trend toward eliminating programs that encourage the participation of the entire community in the community's growth.
In what?
That encourage the growth of the participation of the entire community in the growth of the community. What do you see as the specific benefits of the city maintaining the current program given this national trend?
I think we have in front of us the greatest prosperity this city has ever seen because we're working a world market that's so much bigger. I think our sure is some people are going to do a lot better, some are going to do worse. I think what we need to do while we can is to give each group a stake in our economy so they'll have a chance to move in among the people who are doing better, so that we'll have role models out there for these youngsters coming up. It's hard to go into the particular community if you can't point to an adult role model. I think you need to come in, and we've tried to do neighborhoods and to bring government services up to date. Anybody that thinks there's no discrimination, go look at some of the minority neighborhoods and what the government has done there, and then go look at some of the more affluent neighborhoods, particularly those just outside the city. Discrimination is down. I'm happy it's down. It's not over. I hope this whole community will come together, each of us caring for one another, each of us caring that each of us have a stake, each of us caring that our children have a chance to make the most of themselves that they can.
Linda.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Next week, or the week after, or perhaps the month after that, a federal judge here in the city of Houston could enter an order that will declare unconstitutional what the city's current affirmative action and minority preference programs are. That could happen. Likewise, federal legislation has been introduced that has been co-sponsored by Congressman Archer, Congressman DeLay, and Congressman Brady, all of the Houston area, in which language identical to the Houston Civil Rights Initiative will be working its way through Congress. This program that we have today is going to be killed either by the courts, the Supreme Court, or federal legislation. HCRI is about replacing race and gender with economic disadvantage. We should drop this now and make plans for this now before we're forced to by the courts or by the Congress.
We now move to round 2 of the debate, where the panelists asking the question of one participant last time will now ask a question of the other participant this time. We first begin with Jesse Gonzalez asking a question to Ed Blum.
Mr. Blum, if your referendum passes, how will the city now identify those people that truly need help, since they can no longer use race, sex, ethnicity, or national origin?
Cities around the country, whether it's the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey, whether it's the city of Jacksonville, Florida, and dozens of others, have had their minority and women business enterprise programs declared unconstitutional. Those cities have conducted massive studies and have expended tremendous amounts of money to make sure that women and minorities weren't dropped because of court edict. What they did was to identify parameters, specific ideas about individual businesses based primarily on how long a business has been incorporated or attempting to do business. Rules for contracting have been changed, they've been simplified, they've been made easier, and more importantly than anything else, those long-time contractors that have been benefiting from these programs, that are wealthy and have made lots of money at this, have been dropped, and a new generation of disadvantaged emerging businesses were identified based upon annual income for the last 3 years. Why doesn't the city of Houston take some of the money that we're spending on the 35 full-time employees in our city's affirmative action office? Why don't we take some of the money that we've spent on these disparity studies and channel that money into disadvantaged emerging business programs? That's better than what we've got right now.
One minute rebuttal by Mayor Lanier.
Well, first of all, I don't agree we're going to lose the lawsuit, and I think if you really thought so, you wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of this petition. And you know, if you're going to have a race-neutral affirmative action program, what you're really going to do is a practical matter, given the political realities of the city of Houston, you're going to double the program. You're going to add poor people to it. You're going to have 40% instead of 20, and it's going to be a dickens of a deal to sit and analyze. You look at some of the factors at the universities now that you've got to go into and try to have award those time by time. As you looked at your subcontracts, you're going to have a mess on your hand. That's uncharted territory. What we're doing now works. There's no reason to junk it. We have remarkable ethnic stability in this community. Most people think ethnic relations are getting better. This city says its diversity is an asset. It is. Don't risk destroying it.
The next question will be asked by Steve Smith to Mayor Lanier.
Mayor, some of the opponents of this effort are claiming it is a barely concealed effort of racism at its worst, despite the fact that it's called a civil rights initiative. Do you attribute racist efforts to what Mr. Blum is trying to do? And following that up, would you also call those who plan to vote for it racist?
No, I don't think so. I think his point of view is the legitimate one to express. I think that's the hope of all of us. And I think there may well come a time when we'll be there. I don't think we're there now. I live in this world. I work it. I know, and studies show that if we drop this program, you'll move affirmative action, you'll move the women and minority portion back toward that 5% number. That's what happened in Richmond. It's not healthy for this city, for the majority contractors to win 95% of the business and not even care enough about women and minorities that they're willing to get off their rears and go over and look and see if competitive quality doesn't exist at competitive prices there. That's all we're asking of them. That's not an unreasonable burden. This city will be healthier if they discharge it, and as a matter of fact, they do discharge it. Many of them are finding wonderful new contractors. Many of them are exceeding their goals. The ones that haven't, we haven't sanctioned. We just keep trying to encourage them to look.
1 minute rebuttal by Ed Blum.
I agree with the mayor. Men and women of all backgrounds can disagree on this issue. I think the charges of racism thus far have been very few, and I hope they remain very far between. We are engaged in a great conflict of vision as to how race will be used in our public policies. We can either be reactive to the courts, we can be reactive to Congress, or we can make the plans today to change the rules that the city has. It's not difficult to change these rules. We made them, we can change them. We can drop race and ethnicity. We can spend the money and make the commitment to understand emerging businesses. And we can ensure that people who are disadvantaged economically will have the opportunity to compete. We've seen what U of H can do over University of Texas. We've seen what HISD can do over cities that have had other programs changed. Let's not make the same mistakes as those groups.
The next question will be asked by Linda Binge to Ed Blum.
Mr. Blum, do you propose that the collection of data for types of businesses receiving city work be eliminated? And if so, how do you propose the lack of preference requirements be monitored and enforced? If not, what do you propose to, how will you accomplish this task?
I think if this city will adopt a program, much like these dozens of other municipalities around the country have done, that what is now described as a goal could even become something more definitive and less nebulous as a goal. Why doesn't the city mandate, under a new, well-thought-out, well-conceived program, that 30% or 40% of business goes to disadvantaged emerging companies? It's very easily monitored. It's very easily calibrated. We know how difficult it is. Any contractor will tell you how difficult it is to monitor and to keep up with the requirements that the city and the state and the federal government have on race issues. We could take those same kinds of requirements and apply them to disadvantaged business economics. It's not difficult, and since we made the rules here in the city, we can change the rules here in the city.
1 minute rebuttal by Mayor Lanier.
I don't want to unleash, if this passes, and I think there's at risk, the sort of hatred that has surrounded the Hopwood decision, the University of Texas, and what's happened at the University of Texas Law School, where admissions dropped from something like 40 down to 4 African-American students. And these uncharted waters that we want to risk our ethnic relations on, to consider these other factors in bringing people in. Let me read you some of the factors that they're adding in under this program. Yeah, from the University of Houston Law School. Community of service or volunteer work. Reliability, communication skills, responsibility, leadership, judgment, honesty, ethical, other unusual cases at the discretion of the committee. That's a total mishmash. You're not able to study capacity of that group. My goodness, you can't even find them. I think that'd be a foolish move, totally unworkable, totally impractical.
Can everyone hear the questions that are being asked? Can everyone hear the horn?
No, it's loud enough.
We next have a question asked by Jesse Gonzalez to Mayor Lanier.
Mayor Lanier, my experience is lack of business skills for many of the certified businesses. Would the community and city not be better served by providing business training, education, and encouragement of small business participation with the city in lieu of the current affirmative action program?
We do that now, but it's not in lieu of it, it's in addition to it. For example, we have a training school over that we run with A&M at the old Baker Hughes plant, where we train people to do construction work, where we train people in construction management. We have a mentoring program that the Greater Houston Partnership joins with us in. We have any number of programs where we really reach out and try to improve the skills. And that's worked along with the affirmative action program, where after we do that, we ask people such as yourself, who may not know of this emerging group over there, to go over and look and see if you can't find some women that might do some accounting work, or some Asians that might do, or African American or Hispanics, and not at any sacrifice to yourself, but at purely market rates. And we try to help them qualify so that that market capacity will be there when you go look. And when you come back and tell us that that market capacity is not there, we re-examine it. And I made a note here, I think in 90 cases we've lowered the goals in that particular kind of work because we don't want you to go look unless we really believe that capacity is there.
1 minute rebuttal by Ed Blum.
Throughout the country, Jesse, minority contractors have complained of the same problems that they complain about here in Houston. And racism is not the problem. The problems are universal. The bidding contract process is complicated. It requires lots of computer skills. Many startup businesses, minority businesses, don't have those computer skills. The bonding requirements are exorbitant. The insurance requirements are exorbitant. The capital needed to sometimes compete are exorbitant. Why don't we change those things? Why don't we have the city alter those kinds of hindrances to small businesses rather than continue to grant these contracts by race and ethnicity? It's not racism. It's problems endemic to small business. Let's spend the money to help small business as opposed to spending the money to monitor these goals and these quotas.
For those of you in the audience who are watching your clocks, we are going to have 2 more questions and then 2-minute closing statements by each side. We now move to a question by Steve Smith to Ed Blum.
Mr. Blum, if you don't get the wording you want on the ballot, will you go to court? If the initiative loses, will you try to force a second election?
It's my hope that everyone in this room will contact your city council member. Whether you agree with this wording, whether you agree with the goals of this initiative, is really irrelevant from here on out. What the mayor has done, and perhaps what he has been advised to do by the legal department, is to take what will eventually be the law of the land here in Houston, and that is, if HCRI is successful, the wording that is on that petition will become the law. That is the law that courts will use to interpret the implementation of the program. It is inconceivable to me that a 39-word paragraph that's identified in paragraph A, the paragraph that I read to all of you at the beginning of my opening statements, the paragraph that is identical to what federal legislation is and nearly identical to the 1964 Civil Rights Act, those 39 words should be put before the voters of the city of Houston and let them make up their minds on those words. Not the words coming from the city attorney, not the words coming from the mayor, but the words that will actually be the law. I think it's only fair and I think it's only right, and I hope you contact your city council member and ask that the will of the people go forward. Thank you.
We are charged with the responsibility of writing a caption for this petition. That's what the city does, that's what the state does. What we did was copy Mr. Blum's language. He doesn't like it now, but what he put up on the top of his petition was a charter amendment to end affirmative action. That's what Norm Adams said he thought this debate was about. Now, if the polls show that they'd like to put some of these ideas into affirmative action, they're backing off ending affirmative action, and they want to do something else. I was thinking maybe Mr. Blum was hoist on his own petard, but you know, I've always wondered what a petard was. So I looked it up in a dictionary, which I brought with me in contemplation this question might come. Petard, injured by one's own cleverness. His words. And I can't resist this. Yes, I can. You probably kept me out of trouble.
Mayor Lanier, in the recent polling that indicates that the majority of Houstonians are in favor of affirmative action program in the city, there were some indications, however, that there were some concerns about the program, that there could be some improvements in the program. Do you see any changes that would be beneficial to address these concerns?
Sure. I think most of the mayoral candidates have come with things. I think the idea of graduation is legitimate. I think that could be explored. Incidentally, most of these assistance programs that Mr. Blum said he'd like to see, we're really doing. I would invite you sometime to read the program. It's an ongoing thing. We ought to make it better as it goes along. We ought to have develop a sense when this program has outlived its usefulness. My idea is that won't happen until each group has a significant stake in our economy. But what this does, it ends it. You won't be able to amend it. You can't make it better. You're asked to join to a new program that we've not tried, that we've not seen, that if you look at some of the standards they use will just scare you to death. And it's also a very questionable legality for reasons that I won't go into. But no, I think it ought to be a living document that ongoing mayors and councils ought to have a right to amend and improve. I don't think we've written the last word on it. I will say this. We worked as hard on this to do a good job with this city as I've ever worked on anything in my life.
Rebuttal. Rebuttal by Ed Blum.
You know, I think it's important to realize that in the course of this debate, this program has been characterized merely as a goals program. I have brought letters that have been sent to me by men who have received these over the last few months from the city of Houston. Dear Mr. Smith, for lack of a better word, in accordance with post-bid procedures, document 4.5, paragraph blah, 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 the following deficiencies have been noted. The proposed list of subcontractors under the Minority and Women's Business Program reflects only a 2.7% participation. This does not meet the required 10% goal for this project. You have until May the 5th to satisfy the 10% goal for this project. This does not meet the required goal? How can a goal be required? It's like a paid volunteer. This is not what the mayor has described. It needs to end.
That completes the question and answer portion. Now we go to the closing statements, both of which will be 2 minutes in length. First, the statement provided by Mayor Lanier.
First point, we've had 400 people not meet their goals. None have been sanctioned. They've been fussed at occasionally for not using a good faith effort to try, but I told one contractor if he minded getting fussed at, he was in the wrong business, he ought to take up the ballet. Houston is a cosmopolitan, diverse, international city. We have in front of us the greatest prospects in the history of our city. But how we get along is most important. Most multi-ethnic societies fail. Ours is working. People here think our ethnic relations are getting better. People here think our diversity is an asset. Affirmative action program where we give people a chance. We give them a look. We give them a chance is playing a part of that. It helps all people trust city government. We're asked to abandon this, put it over where we can't fix it, can't improve it, knock it out. No effort, no looking, and jump into an abyss that Mr. Blum can't define. He doesn't know whether what he's talking about will pass. He doesn't know whether what he is talking about will work. He really, in all due respect, he's a bright young man, but he hasn't had years of practical experience working these contracts, working with people, trying to get people to work together. There's a disagreement here, but there's some reason the Indians named the oldest Indian the chief. Our city rests, I think, on the fragile foundation of ethnic trust. It can be our biggest strength. It can be our biggest weakness. Don't gamble with it. Don't abandon something that's fair, that was agreed to by all sectors, and is working. We may come to the time where we don't need to look to find that capacity out there among women and minorities. That time's not now. Vote no, please.
And now the closing statement by Ed Blum.
Ladies and gentlemen, there's an important, wonderful tradition in my synagogue that I believe provides an appropriate symbol for the crossroads that we're at here in Houston and our nation. Many of you, I'm sure, have attended a bar or bat mitzvah service. That's when a young man or a young woman who enters adulthood goes before the congregation to lead the religious service. At the beginning of the service, the Bible scroll is handed from grandparent to parent, and then finally to the young man or woman that's going to be conducting the service. From generation to generation, principles are kept. We Houstonians are now being handed principles from an earlier generation that were fought and struggled over for most of our nation's history. Those principles, I think, are best embodied in Justice Thurgood Marshall when he said that the Constitution is colorblind is our dedicated belief. We cannot hand down to our children a society in which race and gender preferences infect our public policy. History does not have any examples of successful nations with racial preference programs. You can't find one. To those who say it is not time to abandon race, I ask you, when? And to those who say this is not the right way, I ask you, how? The successful passage of HCRI is just the beginning. Much work remains in front of us. Ladies and gentlemen, join with me to ensure that the next generation of Houstonians will inherit the principles we so greatly challenge. Vote yes for the Houston Civil Rights Initiative. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.